And that process was like giving new meanings to swimming in my life. Like when I finished one practice without having a panic attack, I would go to the mirror and say like, good job, well done.
Yeah.
When I would step up on the blocks and not have like an anxiety crisis behind the blocks, I would say, well done, even though I was still going slow. So it was like embracing my vulnerability and my story. I think that's what has given me strength.
After swimming for Brazil in 4 Olympic Games, Joanna Maranhão came to a point in her career where she had to face one of her hardest challenges. With great courage, she confronted her past abuse that she underwent from her childhood coach, and now advocates to protect athletes and seeks justice for survivors. This episode of Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories, hosted by Lynn Foley, contains details of sexual violence. Please take care when listening to Joanna's journey.
Swimming came to my life when I was very young, at 3 years old. I'm from Recife, so it's the northeast part of Brazil. So we're always going to the ocean, swimming pool, lakes and stuff. So my mom thought, well, those kids, they need to know how to swim. And I don't have the exact memory from the first day that I had a contact with the swimming pool, but I do have this memory in this sense of belonging. I've always been like average in school, like average in everything, like passing is good, being average is okay. But in swimming, kind of felt like this is my place. So I literally fell in love, and got like curious, like where is this gonna take me? Inevitably, I kind of understood that it was easy for me to do what the coach was telling me to do, to learn the freestyle and then the backstroke. And I was like, oh, now we're going to the breaststroke, we're going to the butterfly. So I was really wanted to master those 4 strokes. Um, and it was inherent in me that in order to be good at it, you really need to work hard. So that came easily. I didn't have to go through that period where someone had to explain to me what does it take to become an athlete, or does it take to become a good athlete or a competitive athlete. It was like natural to me. So I literally fell in love with it, and all the family just came on board, like it was new to all of us. We didn't have anyone who was an athlete in the family, so it was new to all of us, like becoming a member of the federation. How do you do that? So like traveling in weekends for competitions. But it was so nice. I do have memories of those small competitions with my entire family within the stands, when there was like 3 girls competing and I came in third and they were like celebrating. So not that you got last, you got third. So I mean the earlier years in swimming, they were just amazing. Like one of my favorite memories. Yeah.
That's a lovely story about falling in love with something that you then became pretty good, very good at, and was able to continue. So at a very young age, you did tell me that you became very focused on one day competing in the Olympics. Can you please talk with me about that pathway to swimming for your country at the Olympics?
Yeah, so 1996 was a very important, amazing slash terrible year of my life, but it was the first time that I saw the Olympics on the TV. And I remember being like at the swimming pool, there was like a TV for us to watch the games. And I was just mesmerized. I saw like Dara Torres, this US swimmer, for the first time, like I don't know, her attitude. It was not just how fast she would swim, but how she felt on that space. It meant so much to me. And then I thought, like, I really want to go there. I want to be her. Well, I wasn't her. Spoiler alert. I don't have any Olympic medals. She has like 10. But I mean, it was definitely like, a motivation for me to be there one day. And it just, again, it was inherent to me that like my life would be different from my school friends. Sorry. And that I had to rest after school to go to practice. And I just did that. And it was like literally, I went with the flow. I told my mom, I think I was super young. I was telling her, maybe I need to go to this club when I'm 12 or 13 so I can do double training. And I might need to go to this school. And my mom was like, okay, like whatever you want to do. So things happened pretty quickly. At age 14, I was national champion in my country, and Brazil is not really popular for swimming. We used to be good in
No.
soccer after the 7-1 in Germany. I don't think we're that good anymore, but we used to be really good in soccer. Um, So 14 years old, I was at national championships, and then 15, I qualified to the first Pan American Games, and then 16, I qualified to the Olympics, and 17, I was racing an Olympic final. So it was like everything was happened very fast, but at the same time, it was I put a lot of hard work into those years coming up to the Olympic Games. Like I remember doing like 14 kilometers in a day and like being alone because all of my friends, they kind of quit swimming. They were like focusing in studies and school and stuff. And I was like, oh, I really want to do this, but still working hard, even though I was alone at the pool at 5 a.m., you know? So yeah, and things happened pretty quickly. And swimming was a big part of my life. I went to 4 games, so it wasn't just Athens, like Beijing, London, and Rio. So it was a long time living this life. Yeah.
And you started, so your first Olympics, how old were you at your first Olympics, Joanna?
I was 17. So I say that it was like a Disneyland when I was entering that final. I was so happy. Happy because for the first time, the narrator is gonna say my name. And I really liked his voice. So when he said he didn't say Maranhão, but I do remember him saying like Elaine Savage, Joanna Mello, and I was like, oh my God, he's saying
And
my
that's me.
yeah, that's me. I made it.
And
So yeah, it
so
was really
you
fun.
must have been in your 30s-ish or late 20s when you did your last Olympics.
Yeah, I think it was 28. Yeah, 28. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
last
still
one.
in the prime of an athlete's career, really.
Yeah.
And I now know that throughout much of your childhood and adolescence, you were groomed and abused by your coach, and that it required a lot of time and personal courage to eventually disclose what was happening to you. I thank you in advance for sharing the parts of this experience that you are comfortable to share.
Thank you. Thank you for that. When I mentioned 1996, which was the year where I saw the Olympics for the TV, it was actually the year where I was severely sexually abused. I was raped by my coach. And I mean, lack of knowledge on my rights and overwhelmed in pain, not knowing how to describe what happened. I, like many victims, I decided to keep it to myself. And quit swimming was not an option. I just had to stay away from him. So I came up with a plan to like, Mom, I want to switch clubs. I want to switch schools. And I gave her the excuse that it was because of performance. And to some extent it was because I was performing slower after those abuses had happened. And then I just pretended that none of this has ever happened to me. And it worked for a long time. It kind of worked. There were some post-traumatic effects that I didn't identify or relate to what happened, like passing out when I was triggered by something, not being able to sleep in my own room, cutting my hair really short and wearing my brother's clothes because I didn't want to be recognized as a woman, because there was like, okay, if they don't know if I'm a girl or a boy, that's like safety to me. So now I do understand that there was a response of trauma. But then right after the first Olympic Games, when we call that like that very critical period where we go like, okay, so am I going to do this all over again? Or am I going to take a break? That's when you start like reflecting on everything. That's when those memories came back. And I was like, gosh, so I cannot push them away anymore. It was no longer an option. So I had to face the fact that I was raped in the same sport that has given me so much. And that was when I think the real career started, because until Athens, it was so easy. I think I can say it was easy because it was fun. Hard work was fun. Racing finals was fun. But then after that, like understanding that, okay, so that happened to me. And then living in this body with those experiences, it was tough for me to kind of like accept those facts and forgive myself. Forgive him is something that I decided that I cannot do, but forgive myself, understand that I wasn't the one to blame. And how do you move forward with that? You know, so through that process, there was a lot of pain, and I really wanted to erase that pain. So I kind of like, I tried to take my life away, but it wasn't my life that I wanted to terminate. It was the pain. So it really was the process of understanding all of that. Obviously, my performances have been impacted. I was never as competitive as I was in Athens, but I made a decision in 2007. And I remember this conversation with my mom saying, like, I either make peace with the sport, even though it means that I'll never be as fast, or I quit swimming. I cannot hurt myself, and I cannot no longer hurt the memories of the sport that has given me so much. And I'm so happy that I've chosen to stay in sport. And that process was like giving new meanings to swimming in my life. Like when I finished one practice without having a panic attack, I would go to the mirror and say like, good job, well done.
Yeah.
When I would step up on the blocks and not have like an anxiety crisis behind the blocks, I would say, well done, even though I was still going slow. So it was like embracing my vulnerability and my story. I think that's what has given me strength. Yeah.
And that's an incredibly courageous thing to have to do, and to figure out how you can self-treat almost by how you're going to talk to yourself and build your own self-belief and confidence. And that must have taken a huge amount of courage as well. Following your disclosure, when you decided it was time to disclose this, you mentioned to me that your case did reach the legal system, and over a number of years you were able to be part of having the law changed. And this legislation now carries your name. What were some of the circumstances that led you through that journey to that positive result?
Yeah, well, when I felt like I was ready to disclose back in 2008, I didn't have in the back of my mind that I wanted to report him. I literally just wanted to tell people like this is the process I'm going through. Like be patient with me. I am trying to swim fast. Don't get me wrong, but there are other things I need to take care of first. But when you say I was abused by a coach, people want to know which coach, and they want to know, give me some proof, or why are you saying this now? There's the whole victim blaming that it didn't even cross my mind. I really naively thought that people would back me up. And I wasn't expecting the other victims to show up either. There was a lot of victims who showed up, but I was already 21. And because of the statutes of limitations, there was nothing I could do. I was actually prosecuted by him for defamation, me and my mom. So when he did that, I was like, okay, so it's game time, like I've done this, I've done the harder part, which is like staying alive and staying in sport. You're not gonna get that from me. So that's when I started like advocating to lift the statutes of limitations in my country. There was like a way for me to make justice to 9-year-old me, like I didn't giving up on you, and I'm not gonna give up on you now. And I feel like that's the advocate in me has always been there, but that has like lightened this part of me. So I was like, okay, so now I understand I'm an elite swimmer who has been raped in sport and has stayed in the sport. I was able to change this legislation. What else can I do? And that has been my motivation ever since. Yeah.
So you continued to swim for a number of years, then you commenced a new pathway to study and career. Perhaps you could share some of those steps and that's brought you to where you are today and where you're living and the role you now play in sport.
Yeah. So I stayed in swimming until 2007 when I beat myself back in 2004. I really wanted to be faster than the 17-year-old Joanna. I'm proud of both of them, but like I wanted to be faster, knowing everything that has happened to me. Even though it wasn't a fifth place at the Olympics, it was like a third place at the Pan American Games. But it meant a lot to me, like to finally be faster than when I was 17, when I swam like with no pressure. So when I did that, I was like, okay, so I think that this goal of making peace with swimming is done. Let's move to the next step. And I really wanted to become not just someone with lived experience, but an expert. And science is really important for advocates. I feel like research and advocacy, the more that they align, the stronger we are. So I moved with my family to Belgium to pursue this master's in sports ethics and integrity. I've done a quantitative study measuring the extent to which Brazilian athletes have been exposed to psychological, physical, and sexual violence. And today I coordinate this international network of people with lived experience of abuse in sport in this coalition that is called the Sporting Rights Alliance. So we are this coalition of civil society or organizations fighting for human rights in and through sports. I know that usually advocates and civil society organizations are seen as like, oh, here they come again. But we do believe that sport can be a force for good. But in order to achieve that potential, we need to make sure that we address the violations. So we want to be part of the solution. I think in summary, that's what we do.
So in your role, it seems to me it's a powerful global coalition that you work with as network coordinator. And it also appears to me it's based on the power of sport to make change. Have I understood that? And is that part of the goals that you have in the Alliance?
Absolutely. Like we do believe that we need to use those powerful momentums in sport. Like we need to address the violations that happens in sport, especially like mega sporting events. But we can also use those powerful, beautiful moments in sport as a way to like make the broader society understand what we are referring to when we talk about human rights. So we can both address the issues and use sport to advance human rights. Is both ways. And it's so much more powerful when you do it through a coalition. You know, like we have Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Army of Survivors, we have the Committee to Protect Journalists. So all of those people with expertise in different areas advancing those rights. Of course, when you're talking with sports governing bodies, there's still a lot of resistance because we are pretty much exposing the problems that happens in sport, especially when athletes, they kind of exhaust the system and they don't have access to justice. We're the ones to knock at their door to say, this is happening, we're not going to let that go. So of course the relationship kind of escalates a little bit and it does get tense. But it's good for both ways. It's a win-win situation. We cannot just go back to the 80s when we were not talking about harassment and abuse and we're saying that sports is magical, safe space. It can be, but it also carries a lot of risks, especially for women and girls. So when applying an intersectionality lens, we see through science and through casework, there are some people who are more prone to be victimized than others. So through the Sporting Rights Alliance and the network, we want to make sure to amplify those voices, you know, make sure that these people are heard and their reforms because they have raised their voices.
So it's really important work that you're doing across the world. And you're now living in Germany, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes,
so you can do it from.
Yeah.
And you can do it from anywhere in the world, can't you? This sort of work, and no doubt you travel a lot, I'm assuming. So when we first met, we had a short conversation about the predominance of male coaches for individual sportswomen and for female sporting teams. Is this predominance starting to change? And what do you think else needs to be done to shift the strong imbalance between male and female coaches in many, many sports?
This is such an important question because when we go back to the first modern Olympic Games, women were not even able to participate or even watch. So it was a man's place, you know, it was so the competitive sport, as we've seen, the Olympic movement as it exists, it was built by men and for men. So we've been calling for, like, we really want to participate. We have the right to participate. We can do it and so on. So it has been a long journey. And even when those first women who had the opportunity to participate in the games, they were middle-class white women. So always we need to focus into the intersectional. There has always been a group has been denied this place in sport. And that's why it means so much when we see Black women winning medals at the Olympics or Black women standing up, you know, or women from the global South or LGBTQI women and so on. So we definitely advanced, like we've seen the Paris Olympic Games where the IOC has spoken a lot about 50-50 in terms of participation. Yes, but we need to make sure to see ourselves as any stakeholders in sports, not just as athletes. When we look into women as coaches, then it's definitely not even close to 50-50. If we go to positions of power, then that's even less. So we need to make sure that we have more women and women who wants to embed this intersectional approach into what does it mean to be a female athlete, what does it mean to be a female coach, what does it mean to be a female president of the federation or a female president of the International Olympic Committee. We need to see those things happening and we need to keep pushing. And keep pushing, it doesn't mean that we're not happy with what we have gained over the years. It means that we need more. And we always have to reflect on those victories. I think it was Simone de Beauvoir who said that, I don't know if I can translate that, but we said like women's rights never permanent. She said something like that. So we have to be mindful and, you know, like we have to be cautious at all time so we don't go back on our rights.
And we'll come to it a bit later, but that whole piece about sometimes it feels like we're going backwards around gender-based violence and the development of gender equality around the world, doesn't it? Rather than going forwards. Well, that's certainly how it looks from my perspective. Do you have any thoughts? Because Zonta International focuses on raising awareness of and advocating for and educating women and girls to ensure that women's rights are human rights, which is what we've been talking about. You got any other ideas on what else needs to happen more globally around the women's rights issues? Like, I hear it in the sport, but what do you think about more broadly to stop it going backwards and actually to make some ground?
I feel like there's so much that we need to do, and you raise a really good point about the resistance. Like the more that we advance, to be honest, I'm a bit scared to see this resistance to human rights that has been going on globally. Like you said, I've been living in Germany and I've been watching this. It's not just in my country, it's in Germany, it's in the US, it's everywhere. So I feel like we need to be more strategic on how we're gonna fight back to say like no step back and nothing about us without us. How that's gonna be operationalized. This is a very hard word to say in English. So I feel like we need to be as strategic as we can be. And sometimes because we do have differences in the way that we see things move forward, we kind of divide ourselves. But those differences, in my humble opinion, they are minor compared to what we're trying to get. There's a common ground with where we want to get. So be more strategic, co-creating, collaboration, coalition. I'm all in for a collaborative work. When we were setting in the network, we kind of like did this consultation with a lot of people with lived experience, and even like moving forward with the network, everything is decided collectively. And I think there's a lot of power in it. So to counterattack those attacks on gender base, on our gender agenda, I feel like we need to be more strategic, whatever that means.
And I like that line about nothing about us without us. It's so incredibly important. Women have to be at the table and we have to be part of the solution for everything, but particularly when it comes to women's rights and human rights. When we first met a while back, we also spoke about the FIFA Women's World Cup, Soccer World Cup in Australia last year, and how it made a considerable leap forward for human rights. Can you share more about your views on that with me, about how it took that leap forward for women's rights and human rights?
Yeah, so that specific Women's World Cup, with all the success that we've seen in little girls watching the Matildas and so on, when Australia and New Zealand were nominated as host countries, they started working in collaboration with civil society organizations to kind of like map what were the potential human rights violations that could occur, how can we address them, and what kind of legacy for human rights we want to leave after those games. And it's, in my opinion, is the best report and the best collaborative work that I've ever seen done in the human rights arena in sports, and definitely something that needs to be replicated. So there's a lot of discussion over like, how do we grow women's sports, making sure that we don't replicate what happens in men's sport. I always say, well, like, go back to that World Cup, see what these people have done, what the community has done, how they had like engaged and embedded human rights through the entire process, how they were like very transparent to the limitations and where they can do better. Everything is written on that report. So if there is a positive benchmark about mega sporting events, women's sports, I think that World Cup is it's what we need to replicate, and it's our gold standard. Yeah.
And sitting here in Australia and being part of it, and not one who follows sport all of the time, or rarely in my case, I have to admit my daughter and I watched quite a lot of the games, not just the ones where the Matildas played, because it was fun, it was interesting, it was exciting, and soccer is an exciting sport. Like, it just moves like the speed of light. And you're right, watching little girls, but teenagers and slightly older teenagers, so excited and engaged about the Matildas, but about all the other women who were playing too. There were a lot of other stars there, and whether teams were winning or losing, it was that engagement. I think that's what I felt here. So I think that's part of what you're talking about, isn't it? That building a community of people who see sport as important for women.
Absolutely. And And it's not like there was like a replication or an attempt to do what the men's World Cup does, which is also fun. I like watching the men's World Cup. I'm Brazilian, like I do like watching soccer, but it was like the own signature on what women's sport should and could look like. In a way, I mean, if we talk about legacy, those videos of like little girls watching the Matildas, for me, that's like, that's it, that's exactly it. There's no way that I look to those girls and I don't think back of myself 1996
Yes.
watching the Olympics for the first time. And I do get emotional because like, that's exactly it. That's exactly what we want. So it's not denying the bad things that happen in sport, because sport's not isolated from society. So it's both ways. It's addressing these issues while also like making sure that people know about the beautiful side of sport. Both things can coexist, in my opinion. Yeah.
I'm often asked by women how they can develop a stronger voice, be more courageous, get their opinions heard. How did you develop your voice? I know you've talked a lot about, what's happened to you and your disclosures, etc., and what you're doing now. But how did you develop that voice and the courage? And what do you think we can all do to lift our voices to make a greater difference?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question because when we are impacted by violence and abuse in our lives, like some of us don't even have the opportunity to speak up. We'll have to remain silent for the rest of our lives. So I always, when I come up to those spaces, I say like I'm sharing my story because I want to share, but I want to honor all of you, even though you decide to never share your story with me. I believe in you and I honor you. So we need to create those safe spaces for those women and girls to feel like that they can disclose. Not everyone who wants to speak up about something wants to report and go through the entire investigation. Sometimes, like, I really want to put that out. I'm not crazy. I'm ready to put those words out and disclose. It's almost like you're vomiting. Like one of the physical reactions of my body when I'm triggered, it's literally vomit. It's put that out. It's like my body saying, like, let's clean that up. It's literally what happens when I talk about it, when I disclose. Like, it's like I want to live through it. So we need to create those spaces for people to speak on their own terms when they feel comfortable, and make sure that we have services provided for after speaking up, because speaking up requires a lot from us, from victims and survivors, and it stays in our bodies, all the reactions, all the impacts of trauma and how we navigate trauma. So, and that's actually exactly why the mission of the networks, like, create and strengthen those safe spaces for people impacted. That's what we need to do. We can't look into the future without taking care of the people that are being harmed in this exact moment, and they were harmed in the past. So I always say, like, when it comes to the safeguarding agenda in sports, yes, we need to have education. We need to, make sure that we shift the culture, but we cannot forget remedy, and we cannot forget about the people that have been harmed in the past. They are part of why we are here in this exact moment, and we need to take care of them.
So do you think there is power in, and well, I believe there's power in the sharing of stories, hence the reason for this podcast, but the power of sharing stories or telling stories, is that something that you think can powerfully further the agenda?
Yes, 100%. Especially because I always say, when I share my story, I kind of have ideas on what I think that should be done in the Brazilian sports, for instance, based on what I have lived and what I hear from other victims. But the more stories that we hear, the more seats that are given at the table for more people of us, then more solutions are going to come up. So sometimes the system and the sporting system is kind of resistant to say, like, oh, but it's too overwhelming, it's too complicated. Maybe it's actually going to make your work a lot easier, because you're going to see from people with lived experience where the gaps are, the reasons why it has taken them 15 years to disclose, the reason why it's still happening, and then you're going to find solutions. So it's like, I feel like one of the ways from storytelling and story sharing is to shift the narrative that we are part of the problem. It's actually the opposite. We're part of the solution. And we're sharing that because we want to be part of the solution, because we care, even though it has happened in my case in sport and to other people inside the family. We want to be part of the solution. We want families to be a safe space. We want sports to be a safe space. We want the workspace to be safe for women and girls. And we're not going to find solutions if we don't share the problems.
That's right. And talk about them and then look for solutions within that, and bring men along with us and have men at the table as part of the solution, not just part of the problem. What do you think are your greatest leadership gifts? And how do these support you in today's work?
Oh, leadership. Yeah, because this is funny because leadership resembles me authority, and because of sport, I'm like, no, 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 I'm not a leader. You know, I'm a facilitator, but I do understand, and there's a good way of using that authority. There's a good use of
Yes.
autonomy of authority, and I've seen. I'm a mom, so I see this on a daily basis, like the good use of the authority that you have to build. But I think that my greatest skill is it's resilience and empathy. um I the moment that I use the empathy whenever survivors come to me to disclose a story, that's the time for me to step out of this work, you know. So being empathetic to people with lived experience, and also with people within the system who are trying to make those reforms. I think that's really like, take care of who's trying to take care, you know what I mean? Like a trauma informed approach that is holistic and to everyone. So I feel like being empathetic, it's a skill, and resilient. You know, sometimes my story hurts. Sometimes working in the space really hurts. But I always come back because I really want to see those reforms happening.
Yeah, so maybe the underpin there we're talking about is that courage as well, having the courage to go on, the courage to reflect, the courage to use our gifts, whatever they happen to be, and to get that confidence. So we're very close to wrapping up our conversation. This time's just gone really crazily fast today, Joanna. I'm wondering what messages you'd like to leave with me and with the people listening and watching today.
Um, there's something about living in your own terms that stand up to me a lot, you know, and I feel like I do admire women who live in their own terms, because it takes a lot to reflect what is comfortable to me versus the society that I'm in. So how can I strike a balance between that? And I feel like this is really important. It has been really important for me, and I see how this reflection makes an impact in women and girls, especially all of us who are impacted by abuse and violence in sport. So the message would be like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just reflecting the best way to navigate all of this. So staying in your own truth. You're worthy.
That's a fabulous message for all of us to hear today, for every young person or older person to hear. Joanna, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you a little and to have you as our guest in this series at this time. I thank you. Zonta International thanks you, and we hope that you will remain a friend of Zonta International into the future, because the work that we're all doing is work together on behalf of women and girls.
Absolutely. My gratitude for Zonta for this opportunity, for the work that we do, and I look forward to future collaborations.
Thank you.